Toruń is one of the most beautiful cities in Poland. Picturesquely located on both banks of the Vistula River at an intersection of ancient trade routes, it's been propagating its traditional economy and openness to the world for nearly 800 years. The Gothic buildings of Toruń's Old Town, which were added to the World Heritage List by UNESCO in 1997, present proof of Toruń's centuries-old economic, cultural and intellectual ties with leading cities of Europe associated in the Hanseatic League. Toruń, like all cities with a rich history, has many magical places. Here you can witness the layout of streets of Toruń's Old Town, which has not been changed for centuries and has the most beautiful Polish panorama. The illuminated medieval part of the city seen from the Vistula River and the Nicolaus Copernicus birthhouse. The Old Town Hall has come to serve as a meeting point for both the city's inhabitants and visitors. The present town hall dates back to the end of the 14th century, when the existing administrative and commercial buildings, erected in the Rhineck since the 13th century, were incorporated into one structure. In 1393, when the city council was granted a privilege to build a new town hall, all the separate structures were incorporated into a single two-storey quadrangle. The Gallery of Gothic Art is located on the ground floor, where formerly stalls and bakers' stands were placed. The gallery consists of sculptures and sacral paintings from the middle of the 14th century to the beginning of the 16th century, which represent the main motifs of medieval art. The exhibits come from the area of Eastern Pomerania and from Silesia. The next permanent exhibition is Old Toruń. History. The exhibition aims at presenting the history of Toruń up to the 18th century, with the focus on the work of Toruń craftsmen. On the first floor of the town hall, in the Townsman Hall, the Gallery of Townsmen's Portrait from the 16th to the 18th century is located. A room is dedicated to the sacral art of Toruń. The Royal Hall, which was usually used by the third rank and file, representatives of small merchants and craftsmen, took its name from the prominent visitors who were put up for the night here. It was in this hall that King John Albert died in 1501. There are a series of portraits of Polish kings on display by Jan Jacobi from Toruń, as well as other artists. The Szkrilno treasures are exposed in the central part of the town hall tower. The adjoining room is the place where secular silver, made in Polish and foreign workshops, are on display. The statue of Nicolaus Copernicus is situated in the Old Market Square in front of the Old Town Hall. It dates from 1853. Artists' Court, located on the south side of the Old Town Rhineck Square, was the heart of Toruń's patrician cultural life. It was also the scene of many historic events. The present Jesuit Church of the Holy Ghost was built in the 18th century as an evangelical chapel. The church was designed by Ephraim Schroger and built at the end of the 18th century. The project didn't include the tower, so it was built about 100 years later, between 1897 and 1899. The brick Gothic church was founded in the 13th century, and it belonged to the Franciscan order. Firstly, it was a wooden building, but later in the 14th century it was rebuilt in brick. The tower wasn't built because in the Franciscan order there was a rule that didn't allow it. The church, with 3 stellar-vaulted equal-height 27-metre aisles, is one of the prime examples of the so-called High Hall. Star House Museum gets its name from the 8 stars which are placed at the top of the building. The whole facade is embellished with the floral motifs which make the building very interesting. St. John's Church is the best and the oldest example of Gothic style in this part of Poland. The church was built just after the town was granted its charter in 1233. The Nicolaus Copernicus Museum is located in 2 adjoining tenement houses at 15 and 17 Street, both of which were supposed to be the birthplace of the great astronomer. There are several 14th century elements preserved in the building. According to Karol Gorsz's research, he was born at house number 17, but it's now been decided that it must have been number 15. The problem is that records referring to the property, which once belonged to Copernicus's father, aren't consistent with the present numbers of the houses. The room was furnished with contemporary pieces of furniture and the walls with 18th century portraits. There are also 17th and 18th century old prints, astronomical and mathematical devices, among them the compasses of Johann Heuelius from 1638. Esken's Palace is a Gothic house which was reconstructed in the late 16th century in the Renaissance style as a palace of the Eskens, a Toruń patrician family. The entrance portal is attributed to Willem van der Blok. The surviving city walls contain numerous gates and towers facing the Vistula. These walls, together with the fragments of fortifications in Podmurma Street and Rapakciego Square, are the remains of a huge old town defensive system dating back to the 13th century. The Teutonic Knights Castle was built in Toruń, but it wasn't the first castle in that town. The archaeological excavations which were conducted between 1958 and 1966 on the nearby hill upon the Vistula River showed that before the Teutonic Knights Castle there had been one more castle which dates back to the 10th century. In the beginning, the castle walls were made of fieldstones. Part of this wall with crenel can still be seen near the stream in the approaches of the castle, opposite the old mill. The castle was won by Poland, so knights started to reinforce it. It became home to a large number of knights, but in 1420 a fire broke out. Although many people tried to put out the fire, it spread through the whole castle. For people, it was a sign that the rule of the hated order of Teutonic Knights come to an end. People oppressed by the knights started an uprising and laid siege to the castle. The most important rooms, together with the upper cloister, had a rich architectural decoration. The chapel, dating from 1270 to 1280, and the chapter house with a cloister, from 1320 to 1340 in particular. The ceilings, floors and portals were ornamented. Architectural details in the chapel were made of pottery and stone, and it had, like the refectory, a cross-arched vault. The cloisters were covered with a skip vault, and the refectory received a liane vault. St James's Church, the new town parish church, dates back to the mid-14th century with its characteristic double saddle roof. This parish church was originally administered by the Cistercian nuns and subsequently by the Benedictine nuns. In the years 1557 to 1667, it was a Protestant church. The interior furnishings mainly come from a non-extant Dominican church. The main altar, with a painting of St James, is a Baroque piece from the first half of the 18th century. The interior is decorated with 14th and 15th century paintings representing Christ, the Virgin Mary, and popular medieval saints. The neo-Gothic garrison church of St Catherine, built in the years 1894 to 1897, has an 86-metre steeple, which is the tallest in Toruń. In the Middle Ages, a suburban St Catherine's chapel already stood on this spot. Toruń boasts the second largest number, after Krakow, of authentic Gothic buildings and works of art in Poland. Among the arguments used for the medieval town of Toruń to support its nomination for a UNESCO World Heritage Site was the authenticity of the medieval and Gothic character of the town.